begin with new information on Metrojet flight 9268. At least 33 bodies of victims from the crash have now been identified. That is according to Russian state media. The first victim has been released to the family. Meanwhile, the investigation into the crash of Metrojet flight 9268 and the inconsistent clues are just not adding up. A St. Petersburg newspaper reports that some bodies at the back of the plane showed trauma from an explosion, but investigators say they've found no traces of an explosive device in that wreckage. Meantime, Russian state media report that the plane's tail was found 5 kilometers or 3 miles from the rest of the debris. That could further show that the plane broke apart in midair. And for more on the investigation, we want to turn now to Erin McLaughlin. She joins us live from Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. So, Erin, we understand the ground investigation will be wrapped up in Egypt Wednesday, which has surprised many analysts. What's the reasoning behind drawing this to such a sudden close? Can we assume they've already reached some sort of conclusion on what caused this crash, and what do we know so far?
Hi, Rosemary. Well, when it comes to what happened to Flight 9268, it's probably best not to assume anything. Egyptian authorities have been very tight-lipped when it comes to the details of the investigation as well as the timetable for the investigation. What we do know has been coming in bits and pieces, mainly from Russian media sources, the latest of which from Russian state media reporting that the tail of the plane was found some 5 kilometers or 3 miles away from the rest of the wreckage. And that's potentially significant because we know that in 2001, the same plane's tail struck a runway in Cairo, requiring repairs. And some experts say that those repairs, if done incorrectly, could lead potentially to problems down the line. But the fact of the matter is we simply don't know what caused this plane to break apart in mid-air. Egyptian authorities urging people not to speculate. Egyptian President al-Sisi gave a number of interviews to British media outlets. He's expected in London tomorrow. In those interviews, he called reports that the plane came down as a result of a bomb or the result of some sort of missile projection as speculation. He also called the ISIS claim of responsibility to be pure propaganda. We know that authorities are analyzing the so-called black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder, as well as the flight data recorder. Those seen as really critical to solving this mystery. No indication, though, as to when we'll get answers or any sort of transcripts from that analysis.
And Erin, what are Egyptian authorities doing in terms of security in the aftermath of this plane tragedy?
Well, right now, Egyptian authorities telling us that they have not increased security. When we arrived here in Sharm last night, we saw no signs of increased security at the international airport or in the resort itself. Interesting to note that earlier in the year there was an economic summit here, dignitaries in attendance, and our CNN producer who was here at the time said she noticed increased security there. There were checkpoints, they were checking vehicles, very tight security, but we saw none of that when we arrived here last night. Egyptian authorities saying that that's because there is no indication, they say at the moment, that the plane went down as a result of terrorism. The U.S. Embassy, though, for its part, putting out advice to U.S. citizens not to travel to anywhere in the Sinai until the investigation is complete.
All right, Erin McLaughlin bringing us up to date from Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Many thanks to you. Well, the fiery air crash on Saturday has some similarities with another disaster, this one off the coast of Long Island, New York in 1996. Kyung La has more on the similar circumstances and rumors surrounding both tragedies.
The Metrojet crash in Egypt, killing all 224 on board, feels eerily familiar to another major disaster, the 1996 explosion of TWA Flight 800 off Long Island. Peter Goltz was one of the chief NTSB investigators of that disaster. Like the Metrojet crash, satellite imagery captured a mid-air heat signature.
We had that same occurrence at TWA Flight 800. A satellite picked up the signature and it indicated, it confirmed for us what eyewitnesses had seen, that there was a fireball.
But it didn't explain why. It was simply a clue. Also shared between the two disasters, unexplained split-second sounds on the flight data recorders before they stopped recording. The similarities lead Gultz to believe a possible rupture in the fuel tank, which caused the TWA crash, may also be to blame in the Russian plane disaster. Investigators found much of the main debris field close together, but 3 miles away was the tail section. That holds another clue, possible structural failure. In November 2001, the Airbus's tail hit the tarmac on landing. The plane was repaired, but the clear break from the rest of the debris raises this possibility.
It could have been a structural failure of the plane that ruptured the fuel tanks, so the explosion could have been coming after whatever the event that initiated the breakup.
Flight tracking data shows the plane did slow down significantly before the crash, but many outside experts discount a stall. A stall can prove disastrous, like this one in 2013. The 747 cargo plane left Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. It stalled and crashed shortly after takeoff, killing all 7 Americans on board. The heat signature clue could also signal some sort of fire damage in the cargo hold. In 1996, ValueJet Flight 592 took off with emergency oxygen generators improperly stored that caused a fire, and it crashed.
There could have been something going on in the cargo hold. We don't know what they were carrying. Investigators will look at all of those likely suspects. Until they start eliminating them, it's going to be a mystery.
Kyung-la, CNN, Los Angeles.
Well, Volkswagen's troubles just got a whole lot bigger, still reeling from the diesel emissions scandal. The German automaker now says it set carbon dioxide emissions and fuel consumption figures too low when certifying some models. Volkswagen says it regrets the error and will begin discussing ways to fix the issue with the relevant authorities. In addition, US regulators say some Porsche SUVs may have been rigged as well, but Volkswagen disputes that claim. It says the defeat devices were installed in other vehicles. All right. Moving on now, and US regulators have hit Japan's Takata Corporation with a huge fine for selling millions of airbags with a deadly defect and failing to acknowledge the problem. CNN's Will Ripley is in Tokyo and has more. So, Will, this, of course, is a problem that spans the globe. What's Takata doing about fixing it?
Well, Takata has been struggling, frankly, Rosemary, to keep up with the replacement parts that are needed to get all of these airbags fixed. You're talking about 19 million airbags just in the United States affected by this recall. About 15 million of them still need to be repaired, and some of the other several million that have already been fixed may need to even be fixed again. So this is really a staggering burden on Takata, in addition to the staggering $70 million fine that U.S. regulators slapped on the company today. They could have to pay an additional $130 million if they do not change their procedures moving forward. The company's stock trading here in Tokyo, it tumbled 19% in the afternoon. And even it's affecting drivers here in Japan as well. We drive a Honda SUV here at the Tokyo Bureau. We took it in yesterday, had no idea that our vehicle and the airbags in that vehicle needed to be replaced. So it's a huge burden. In addition to that, Honda, one of Takata's biggest customers, announcing that they are dropping the company, saying that they are deeply troubled by what has proven to be systematic behavior over the years of producing a dangerous, faulty product. And even when apparently investigators were aware of it, they did very little to fix it. The problem continued, and now you have the situation that Takata is in today, and millions of drivers on the road all over the world, and especially those 15 million vehicles in the United States where people aren't sure if their cars are safe. They're not sure what's going to happen if they get into an accident, Rosemary.
And Will, let's turn now to a more positive story out of Tokyo, the successful Japan Post Holdings stock market debut. What's the likely impact of that on the Japanese economy?
Yeah, that is a good stock market story today, Rosemary, and I'll walk you down the corner here to my neighborhood post office here in Minato-ku, one of the neighborhoods in Tokyo, because Japan Post, which has 24,000 branches all over the country, they are a commodity in this country, and the initial day one opportunity for retail investors in Japan to put their money into this company, it really was a huge success. 19%, far higher of an increase than what a lot of analysts were expecting on the first day of this stock offering. But the reason for it is simple. Japan Post is a part of our everyday lives here in Japan. We drop off our mail at Japan Post post office. We use the bank. It's Japan's biggest bank. It's also Japan's largest insurance company. And it's also one of this country's largest employers. Some 200,000 people work for Japan Post. And so by offering Japanese people an opportunity to put their money in this company, it's widely regarded as a safe investment, something that people can count on for stable growth over time. It just closed a couple of minutes ago, but I can tell you there was a line out the door just before closing time, as there often is every day. You can see one fella in there using the ATM. And so for people to be able to put their money into this, the Japanese government, it's a $12 billion IPO. They're hoping that Japanese investors can make some money off of the Japanese stock market, which has been doing quite well as of late, but most of that money has been going to foreign investors. This is an opportunity for Japanese, with 80% of the Japan Post stocks allocated for the Japanese investors, another 20% for foreign investors. And so far, so good. Rosemary?
All right. Our Will Ripley with the good, the bad, and the ugly out of Tokyo. Many thanks to you, as always. I want to turn to Houston, Texas now, where voters have repealed a law designed to protect lesbian, gay, and transgender people from discrimination. The city passed the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, also known as HERO, last year, and conservative activists spent millions trying to get rid of it, claiming it would allow, quote, troubled men to go into women's bathrooms and locker rooms. But supporters of the law called that fear-mongering. The city's mayor spoke out after the vote.
I've been an activist for more than 40 years. I have stood here in Houston 4 times when people were given the opportunity to vote on my rights. No one's rights should be subject to a popular vote.
The mayor, who is openly gay, called out what she said was a calculated campaign by the right wing. Well, Ohio voters turned out at the polls on Tuesday and said no to legal pot. They rejected a ballot measure to legalize marijuana for both recreational and medical use. The measure would also have allowed a limited number of farms to grow the plants. The controversial initiative was supported by a host of investors, including a pop star and a fashion